So you sit down at your desk, you're ready to draw, but when you try and put pencil to paper, something's not working. You see what you're trying to draw in your head or in front of you, but your hand doesn't want to cooperate. Your drawings often come out looking a little amateurish, and you can't figure out why. For beginner artists, one of the biggest struggles is getting your hand to work. Today I want to talk about some common drawing issues beginner artists often run into, how to identify them, and how working out can help us better understand what's going on with our head and our hand. First, let's break down some issues that beginner artists often struggle with. A common one I see my students do is something called petting the line, or fuzzy lines. This is when you draw multiple strokes to express a single line. This often comes from students drawing with their wrist as if they were writing something down. This motion looks like you're petting the same line repeatedly and can make your contour look fuzzy and not well defined. A similar issue is overemphasizing a single contour. This happens when you draw over the same line multiple times to reinforce it, causing it to become darker and more pronounced than it should be. If you make a single line and then try to correct it by going over it again and again, you often do more harm than good. This isn't always true, and there is a use case for this kind of drawing approach, but that usually comes with more understanding. Another issue I see is drawing too slowly, which leads to shaky lines. The problem here isn't that the person is taking their time and carefully observing what they're drawing before putting pencil to paper. It's the physical speed at which they're making their strokes. This can sometimes lead to lines that lack confidence and have unwanted shakiness from your hand trying to calibrate the strokes you're trying to make. This next one is more for when you're working traditionally. It's when you use too much pressure with your pencil. When you just carve into the paper, and instead of a drawing, you end up with a sunken relief. This makes it almost impossible to erase any part of the drawing and ultimately destroys the paper you're working on. This one is so common, I have never failed to see it with any of my students that are new to drawing. These are just a few of the most common struggles I see with beginner artists, and they all have a few things in common: a lack of control and a lack of confidence. And this makes sense. If you're new to something, it'll be unfamiliar and maybe even a little uncomfortable. Let's explore that a bit. Let's put down the pencil and pick up a dumbbell. Yes, I'm serious. I want to talk a little bit about working out. In the exercise and bodybuilding community, there's this concept called mind-muscle connection.
Your mind-muscle connection.
Mind-muscle connection.
Mind-muscle connection.
This refers to concentrating on the motion you're doing and focusing on the target muscle of the exercise as you perform the movement. If you're doing the exercise correctly, you'll notice the tension or burn in the target muscle group. You're focusing on the activity you're doing, and your body responds to the stimulus. When you first start working out, there can be a disconnect between your mind and your body when doing an unfamiliar motion. It can often feel very weird or even uncomfortable. Have you ever tried doing a high bar squat or a deadlift? It takes a bit of practice to get the form right. Over time, you get used to the movement and position, and you're better able to focus on your target muscle group once your form isn't a limiting factor. Okay, I hear you, but what the hell does this have to do with drawing? Yeah, I'm getting to that. Give me a second. The same thing is true with your hand-eye coordination, specifically with drawing from both life and imagination. When you first start drawing, there can be this disconnect between your mind and your hand.
You have what my old music teacher, Mrs. Mellinger, calls stupid fingers.
That can be a big frustration for a lot of beginner artists, and it can feel insurmountable. But here's the thing. Despite what this comment says, your fingers aren't stupid. You just need to feel more comfortable and confident through practice. Let's look at how we can do that. What helped me a lot when I was learning to draw was having pages in my sketchbook dedicated to practicing this kind of mind-muscle drawing. You can do this with a sketchbook, loose leaf paper, digitally, on the back of the US Constitution, it doesn't matter. These exercises work across platform? Medium? Medium? Across medium. There's crossplay between different art mediums. Alright, anyway. Welcome back, everybody. Let's take a look at some of these drawing exercises and warm-ups. When you first sit down to draw, you can either take a page out of your sketchbook or open a new file and do a bunch of these to warm up for the rest of your drawing day. All right, this first one I got from Scott Robertson's book, How to Draw Everything? How to Draw Anything? I think it's just called How to Draw. Anyway, it's up here. You can see it. It's probably one of the best drawing books out there. In his book, he talks about this exercise where you basically just add 2 dots to your page and try and connect them with a single line. So the idea here is that you want to tilt your paper or your canvas or whatever you're drawing on so that it feels more natural and comfortable to you when you go to throw out that line. And you also want to make sure that you are ghosting, or at least that's what he calls it, you're ghosting the line before you go out to throw it so that you get a sense of where you're going. This will help with that connection between your eye, the page, and your hand. And what I really like about this exercise is that you can steadily increase the difficulty of it by progressively increasing the distance between the 2 dots that you're trying to connect. So it's sort of like when you go to the gym for the first time. You don't want to start with the heaviest weight possible. You want to start where you're comfortable and work your way up. So wherever you are comfortable is totally fine. And even if you don't hit the dot that you're trying to go for, it's okay, because you can just keep practicing until you get it right. So if you're comfortable with 2 dots that are really close together, that's okay. That's a great place to start. Eventually, you'll be able to increase that distance and make further strokes like that. Building off of that, we are now going to try and connect 3 or more dots with a curved line. So similarly to what we were doing before, we're going to add some dots to our page. We're going to try and connect them with a single curve. A tip that I have for this one, and what feels right to me, is pulling the curve towards you so that no matter where your hand is, your eye is always going to be a little bit ahead of it so that you can visualize where your hand is going to go. I've heard before you want to push a straight line and you want to pull a curve towards you, and I think that this is the reason why, is that you can better visualize where your hand is going to end up. Again, you can increase the difficulty by adding more dots to the page. So let's try and add a few more over here. Another thing that you want to keep in mind when doing this is you don't want to peak the curve like this. You want it to feel a bit more rounded. So that way you know that the curve isn't biased towards one side or the other. We did the dots. We got dots. Yeah. Dots and lines and dots and lines and dots and lines. All right, let's move on to the next one. The next one we're going to take a look at is circles. So you want to try and make a circle using 1 stroke. You want to try and make a circle with a single stroke. Okay, wow, that was actually really good. This one's really easy to do. This is a super fun and quick exercise. The idea really is just you want to get more comfortable with drawing from your shoulder. So the thing that I'm doing here is I'm not drawing from my wrist like this. I'm not drawing my circles from my wrist. I am drawing them from with my entire arm, really. I'm drawing them entirely with my arm, my elbow, my shoulder, all working together. And I think the thing to keep in mind with this is you want to try and draw large enough that you have the ability to use your entire arm with that. That will really help you out a lot. They're not all going to be perfect circles, but that's okay. You just keep on practicing them, and eventually you'll get a lot better at making circles that are more even and that connect at a point. This one is probably the best one that I did out of all of them here. This one's not okay. I'm gonna humble brag here. This one's actually not that bad, right? It's pretty good. Not like I checked to see if that one was pretty close to perfect or anything.
Shut up!
All right, this next one is hatching and cross-hatching. So the idea here is you want to try and draw parallel lines with equal distance or pretty close to it. I like to, again, because we're talking about drawing with the full arm here, I like to take my elbow and plant it so it doesn't move, either on my tablet or on the table or wherever it is that I'm drawing. And again, rotating the paper so that it is comfortable for me, and just make these lines like this, as parallel as you can. And just to give you an idea, my eye is here the whole time, and I'm trying to feel out the distance as I'm making the stroke. So I'm not trying to go back and forth. I'm trying to really get a sense of feeling out the motion. And eventually what you can do is then you can start, when you feel more comfortable with where your eye is going, you can start to look to see if your eye, bringing your eye up here to see where the end point is. And that will help you keep things pretty equidistant. When you're doing these, the closer the distance, the more difficult it is. And you can try and close the gap as you're doing these. And a good way to practice this too is to see if you can vary the gap once you have the equidistant part down. It's a lot more difficult than it seems. Eventually you can try and make a pretty smooth gradient by starting close and then progressively getting more and more further away, so that okay, this was pretty awful. If you start close in the beginning and then go further and further away, you can start making a gradient like this. And that's another great way to practice this. I think this is a really good exercise because it combines the line drawing, the stroke that we were doing with the dots, but taking the dot part out of it and letting you feel the motion as you're making the stroke without having to worry about the start and stop point as much. And then from there, we'll go to the next one, which is cross-hatching. So it's pretty straightforward. We have our hatching pattern that we make, and then we rotate our tablet, our paper, whatever it is we're drawing on, and we want to try and do the same thing by making a pretty even, equidistant crosshatch pattern like that. And this is a great exercise to practice, especially if you're doing pen and ink, or even just with pencil too, because you can start getting a pattern that starts to build up darker value over time. All right, so we've done hatching, cross-hatching. Now let's try and add a cube to the mix. So we're gonna draw a pretty basic cube, and we're gonna combine the hatching and effectively the dot exercise along with the cross-hatching. So now we'll have the top plane, the side plane, and the other side, the back side plane, the third side here. We're going to have the top be blank, and then we're going to add one value of hatching on one side and then a darker value of cross-hatching on the other side. And this is a great way to try and keep things equidistant and contained within the borders, just like I did here. No, but I mean, try and keep it within the borders as much as you can. Another wonderful drawing exercise to practice the strokes and patterns, and in this case even value. All right, this next one is going to be similar to what we were doing before, but we're making more curves. We're going to do C curves and S curves. So C curves and S curves are the two kind of curves that you're going to encounter a lot when drawing, especially in figure drawing. So practicing these is going to be really good. You want to try and draw these curves over and over, similar to how we were doing the ellipses. You can try and draw this sort of like rainbow thing for the C curves. And then for the S curves, you can just try and draw these. This one's really tough. This is honestly, if I'm being really vulnerable with all of you, this was the hardest one for me. For the S curve, it's similar. You want to try and draw them as parallel and equidistant as possible. And this is another way to get that more of that fluid motion down with your hand. And remember, it's easier to pull these curves towards you so that you can see where they're going. Try not to slow down either. And this is a great way to practice the most common curves that you're going to see. So things like hair, clothes, organic forms in general. You're going to see a lot of these. So another thing to add to your exercise warm-up drawing exercise tool belt. All right, so we covered drawing exercises on a two-dimensional plane, but now let's switch it up and practice three-dimensional forms with basic volumes. So when practicing drawing boxes, it really helps to make sure that all of the lines that you're drawing are converging in space to their respective vanishing points. So having a basic understanding of linear perspective here is going to be really helpful. The other thing that you want to do is you really want to make sure that you're drawing through the form so that you can better visualize the interior of the form, but also the space that it's occupying. So you can see here I've drawn these like imaginary dots. I guess they're not imaginary because I drew them. But you can see that I drew these dots here that represent the interior, but it gives me a better idea of where this form is sitting in space. All right, we're gonna throw it back. So ellipses or spicy circles. The way that I like to visualize this is just by adding the axes on the ellipse that I'm drawing. So what this does is it takes the circle that you drew from that circle exercise and it gives it a plane. So instead of it being just a flat 2D shape that we're drawing, we're going to be adding the plane that it's on so that it looks as though it has dimension. And this will come in handy for another volume that we're going to be taking a look at in a second. But the idea here is that instead of thinking of it as just a flat circle, it now has dimension and volume. Or it will anyway. We'll get there. I first learned this one from Michael Hampton's figure drawing book, Figure Drawing Design and Invention. And he recommends doing this because you're going to see a lot of this when doing figure drawing because it describes the top and bottom plane of things and also the perspective that the form that it's describing is going to be in. So a very good, simple exercise to add to your tool belt. All right, so let's combine a couple of these together. And instead of two-dimensional form for the ellipses, we want to start thinking of it in more three-dimensional space again. And we're going to talk about spheres. So drawing spheres, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. That was awful. So drawing spheres, pretty straightforward. We have our circle, but now we want to add volume to that sphere. So we're going to add the axes inside of it, like this. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the way that the sphere has dimension. So we're effectively drawing like a globe when you think about it. And this is where these dots that I drew are coming in handy because it lets you see which form is in front of the other. So this sphere is sort of facing upwards and going out this way. So again, super easy. You just take ellipses or circles and you just draw the axes through them. And you're kind of like drawing the hemisphere too, because what this does is it allows you to think about it like the top and bottom plane, right? So if I were to take this part off, you know, you have this like plane that's on top here, and then this part that's like the bottom of this side. So again, thinking about it in three-dimensional space. But again, super easy to practice. Add some of these to your sketchbook, another wonderful exercise toolkit. All right, we got cylinders. So the basic premise here is that you're gonna draw an ellipses, and then you're gonna draw another one, and you're gonna connect them. Wow. Blech. There we go. And all of a sudden you have a three-dimensional form. So now we have a tube, a cylinder, a three-dimensional form that has curvature to it. And this is a great way to practice things like the construction of the arm, the construction of the leg, anything that has a tube shape. Cylinders are going to help you define that form. So again, another great way to practice just, adding circles. You can make the other circle smaller so that you have more of a cone shape as we get to that. But the idea being that you're still drawing through the form and maintaining the perspective with the major and minor axes. Just like this. All right. We can take a look at this and make other variations, so we can have conical shapes, pyramids, or combining different forms to make whatever your imagination can come up with. So I mentioned that when I first started drawing, my sketchbooks often had pages dedicated to a lot of these different things. I've had sketchbooks that just have like a bunch of scribbles, circles, cylinders, cubes, and sometimes things that just don't even make sense, but just ways to warm up my arm, but really help me get that connection between my hand, my head, my eye, and the page. And finding the harmony of all of that so that it makes it a lot easier when I go through the rest of my day and start drawing. So the more that you practice these, you'll find that you will be more comfortable with drawing with less of a disconnect from your hand and your head. What's great about practicing these basic forms is it allows you to construct whatever it is that's in your mind or what you see in front of you. And eventually you'll be able to stylize that in a way that is a lot more appealing and interesting than just having these fundamental structures. All right, and lastly, I want to go over how I would do these in my sketchbook, and I'm going to do them with both my left hand and my right hand, and I'll explain why in a second. Obviously, this isn't a sketchbook, it's a picture of one that I got off the internet that I put in a file document that I'm working on, so it feels like I'm working in a sketchbook, but you can do them with whatever you have access to. And that's what's kind of great about these exercises. You can do them whenever you have a free moment, as they don't require a crazy setup. As long as you have paper and pencil, you can practice them. Again, the main goal here is to get more comfortable with your hand and increase the amount of control you have over your strokes and lines, while also boosting your confidence in your mark making. Even if you're a more experienced artist, you can still benefit from doing these like a warm-up for the rest of your day. So the reason why I'm doing them both right hand and left hand is to emphasize a point here that with my right hand, I feel very confident in my ability to make marks and basically draw the way that I do. However, when I switch to my left hand, it's completely foreign to me. I have absolutely no control over anything really. Like, as you can see here, I'm trying to draw boxes and lines, and it just feels so uncomfortable. I'm right-handed, so that's what I use to basically do everything when it comes to art and writing. And this just felt like I had absolutely no control over the pencil. So I had the idea in my head of what I wanted to draw, but my hand just didn't cooperate because it's not used to this type of thing. And while it's not a perfect one-to-one comparison, this is how I imagine people who are new to drawing feel when they sit down to draw. When you first start out drawing, there will be this growing pain period while you build up your mind-muscle connection with your head and your drawing hand. It takes time to get comfortable, and your progress will wax and wane, but the more you keep at it, the more that line will trend upward.
Dude, sucking at something is the first step towards being sorta good at something.
Doing these exercises, even just 20 minutes a day, can help you go in the right direction. Once you overcome that initial hump, you'll have a lot more confidence with your drawing ability. So keep on practicing, and I'll see you soon. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Surprise time-lapse time. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment if you tried any of these exercises, and let me know if they helped you out. Also, let me know what you think I should do a video on next. Don't forget to subscribe to Pact for more art videos. My name is James, and I'll see you in the next one.